Hi, this is Barry Ed Hartley, and you are listening to TV Confidential.
Ed Robertson with a reminder that Cam Clark will join us later on in the hour. We'll be up to stay tuned for that. In the meantime, we'll begin our second hour by playing part two of a conversation that began last week with Mark Malkoff. Mark's new book, Love Johnny Carson, one obsessive fan's journey to find the genius behind the legend, takes a deep dive into the Johnny Carson's 30-year reign as host of The Tonight Show. It is a comprehensive, well-researched, but very reader-friendly book that includes interviews from more than 400 Tonight Show personnel, including staff members, production people, writers, friends, and such Tonight Show guests as Carol Burnett, Mel Brooks, Bob Saget, Larry King, Michael J. Fox, Paula Poundstone, Carl Reiner, Bob Uecker, Angie Dickinson, Dick Cavett, Doc Severinsen, many, many others. Love Johnny Carson, available wherever books are sold through Dutton Books as well as Amazon.com. You can follow Mark Malkoff, Instagram, Facebook, wherever social media is, you can find Mark Malkoff. You mentioned George Lopez as just one example of how important getting the approval or support of Johnny Carson was to the trajectory of that comedian's career. Going back to things that I learned, and that you'll probably learn that you won't learn anywhere else unless you pick up a copy of Love Johnny Carson by Mark Malkoff, folks, is that while the impact of Johnny inviting a comedian to join him on the couch after he finished his or her bit was always career changing, it was more so in L.A. than it was in New York.
That's right. To my knowledge, only like 15 or 16 people in 30 years were called over to the couch. And when they did, a lot of times it was life-changing. Stephen Wright, certainly, Drew Carey, Ellen DeGeneres. There were certain people like Seinfeld that took him 5 times doing stand-up before Johnny called him over. It was one of those things where it was just completely different. And there's a couple people that people don't know got called over. Skip Stevenson was one, and then shortly after, like a year or two later, got Real People. There was definitely, in New York, Liz Torres was the first woman called over. Who else? Robert Klein got automatic panel. Rodney Dangerfield was somebody Carson said, I will never call this person over, because they had been in some sort of feud. But Johnny relented a little bit, but he said, I'm not going to call him over. And Rodney was so brilliant that Johnny, of course, called him over, and the rest is history.
We always think of Doc Severinsen and the band, because Doc was with Johnny for most of his reign, but Doc was not the first.
Yeah, originally the NBC forced Skitch Henderson, who had worked with Steve Allen, and Johnny wanted his own person. He didn't even want to bring Ed McMahon. He wanted, because Ed was associated with the game show, Who Do You Trust? Johnny wanted all new people, but there were compromises made, and one of them was that, fine, I'll take Skitch Henderson, but if that happens, my brother Dick is going to direct. And then NBC did relent and let Johnny pick his sidekick, and he wanted his friend, Hank Sims, but Hank didn't want to relocate from California, so Ed took Johnny to Danny's Hideaway, and according to Joanne Carson, wife number 2, Ed got on his hands and knees and begged, crying through tears, for Johnny to take him, and Johnny was embarrassed and said, okay, fine, I'll take you. So, Skitch Henderson was there for a bunch of years, and then Milton DeLugg came in. Johnny did not want Milton DeLugg, didn't have enough power. DeLugg was there for 1 year, and then Johnny was able to get some power and got rid of him and got brought in Doc Severinsen, and there you are.
Hank Sims, of course, came out okay. He was the announcer for virtually every show produced by Quinn Martin. So but it was cool to learn that had things gone differently, Hank Sims would have been the announcer on The Tonight Show.
Hank Sims had one of the best laughs on the daytime version of the Johnny Carson show on CBS. Johnny loved Hank Sims' laugh, and they were friends. And Ed developed his laugh over time, but Hank was just somebody that Johnny felt comfortable with. And back then, for the most part, like Jack Parr and Steve Allen only did the show for whatever, it was 4 or 5 years at the most. No one ever didn't consider anybody that somebody would do it for 30 years. Even Johnny didn't think it was going to he'd do it that long. And it was the best thing Ed McMahon ever did. I mean, obviously getting that was his meal ticket, and he parlayed that into so many other things career-wise.
Ed's relationship with Johnny, I understand, was friendly yet fearful.
It's one of those things where they were in sync probably 95% of the time, but Ed sometimes would overstep and ruin Johnny's joke, and when that happened, Johnny was furious, and Ed would sometimes have to go and apologize, but Ed would, in his defense, would hold back on jokes not to overshadow Johnny, and they could really read each other's thoughts. I mean, they needed each other. I mean, early on, they did pal around. They went out after the show. There were dinners. And once the show moved to Los Angeles in 72, they just saw less of each other. They weren't in the same social circles. They would get together on birthdays and sometimes on the anniversary of them working together on Who Do You Trust. But, yeah, there was definitely separate. And then Johnny lost a son in a tragic accident in 1991. And Ed McMahon then had a son that passed away, I think after the show ended in 95, maybe 97, something like that. And Johnny was there for Ed, and they got a little bit closer after that.
Well, as you just touched on, Ed was a rare number two who could also be a number one. I mean, as he proved with Star Search, as he proved with Publisher Clearinghouse. But as they smoothed out the wrinkles of their relationships, he realized that he had to understand the boundaries so that number two did not upstage number one.
Yeah, I mean, there were definitely some times where it was cutting it close. There was a joke in 1965 about a mosquito, and Johnny for years would reference the mosquito joke, which Ed ruined it. He didn't really know that Johnny was setting himself up for a joke, and Johnny never let him forget it. I mean, he'd joke about it in jest, but it was definitely a serious thing. And somebody was telling me recently, and I'm not surprised, that Doc Severinsen, after they came back from a break, and Johnny was like, "Oh, Doc, I loved that song that you just played," and said the title, and Doc did not correct him. And I was like, that is a smart man. Johnny did not like to be corrected on air.
Yeah.
He would get very, for whatever reason, embarrassed and thin-skinned. There's a couple times on YouTube where Fred DeCordova will correct him, and you can see Johnny, he kind of laughs it off, but it hurts him. And that's why Carl Sagan, his friend, after like 18 appearances, interrupted Johnny twice to correct him on statistics, and Johnny never had him back after that.
Mark Malkoff is on the line with us. Mark Malkoff, host of the award-winning Carson Podcast and a man you've seen or heard on the Today Show, Good Morning America, and NPR's Weekend Edition. Mark's new book, Love Johnny Carson, One Obsessive Fan's Journey to Find the Genius Behind the Legend, is a comprehensive, well-researched, and very reader-friendly book that takes a deep dive into Johnny Carson's 30-year reign as host of The Tonight Show. Love Johnny Carson, available wherever books are sold through Dutton Books as well as Amazon.com.
Stay with us, folks. We'll be right back.
This portion of TV Confidential is brought to us by our friends at Front Porch Realty, the community of realtors in the Northern Bay area of California that is committed to finding the solution that is best for their clients. Whether you're a first-time home buyer or looking to sell or lease your property in Northern California, call Karen Strain at 415-886-7411 or visit frontporchrealtygroup.com for more information on how they can help you.
Ed Robertson, thanking you for listening to the TV Confidential podcast. If you like what you hear, please hit the subscribe button so that you won't miss our next episode.
Hi, this is Harrison Page. You're listening to TV Confidential.
Uh-oh. What the hell happened to this? You know how long I've had this cigarette box on this desk?
You brought that up from New York City?
I brought this from New York. What on earth?
It happened last night.
Who?
Don Rickles.
I did not see the
Don
show
Rickles
last
did it last night. He's taping across the hall. C.P.O. Sharkey.
Can I get over there? Can I get over there?
One of my favorite moments, and you can, and the fun thing about reading Mark's book in a day and age of smartphones and TikTok and short clips that you can find on YouTube is that for virtually every backstory of a particular moment that you go into, Mark, you can pull out your phone and you can find that clip or pretty much close to that clip on YouTube. It just makes it really an interactive experience when one reads Love Johnny Carson or listens to some of the interviews on the Carson podcast. But one of my favorite Tonight Show moments is the moment where Johnny finds out that Don Rickles broke his favorite cigarette box, which is one of the mementos that he brought with him from New York when he started hosting the show exclusively in Burbank in 72. And I had always thought that some of that, there was a little plan. It wasn't totally, much of it was impromptu, as you explained in the book.
Yes.
But some of it, there was a little bit of machinations going on, and you clarify that.
I wanted to know that. So Don Rickles had no idea that Johnny, during the Tonight Show, this wasn't unheard of, to take a camera from the Tonight Show across the hall to NBC with enough cable and disrupt Rickles' taping of CBS Sharkey to confront him about breaking the cigarette box. Rickles had no idea. The only person in that soundstage that had any idea was Aaron Rubin, the producer of C.P.O. Sharkey, that this was going to happen. And it was unbelievable. I mean, Johnny played it off really well that he was sitting down after the monologue talking to Doc, and he organically just noticed that his box was broken. But he had watched the show, and he had the idea that he would confront Rickles during the show. And he had Bobby Quinn, his director, add cable and just make sure that the microphone could reach across the hall. I mean, for one of those heavy cameras to be dragged across the hall, that stuff just did not happen like that. And that was Johnny's brilliance. And then you see David Letterman, his influence on the NBC show, and Dave would interrupt the news. He would go across the hall to the live broadcast. I mean, Johnny was really, really innovative at the time.
Well, yeah, and it speaks to one of the other things you talk about, particularly when you look at the New York years, the first decade of Johnny as host of The Tonight Show, is that there are certain things, Mark, that he inherited from Parr, that he inherited from Steve Allen, but the concept of the host not being someone who sits behind a desk for 90 minutes or 60 minutes, someone who will get out and do a thing like walk across the hall and interrupt C.P.O. Sharkey. That started with Johnny.
Yeah, I mean, Johnny, especially in New York, I mean, the Friday before he premiered The Tonight Show, he was at Yankee Stadium pitching to Mickey Mantle and Roger Maris. I mean, the guy played with the New York Jets at the Polo Grounds, dove out of an airplane, did a lot. He was racing over 100 miles an hour at Indianapolis Motor Speedway with Parnelli Jones and Mario Andretti. So Johnny really loved doing these demonstrations, which did start with him in New York. And he would do this on Who Do You Trust? It was people with just occupations, sometimes odd, and Johnny would just kind of go along with them. And he was such a good, brilliant reaction comedian with his reactions that would get sometimes the biggest laugh of everything. But you're right, him leaving and doing things and being active was definitely, that was something different and new.
Let's talk a little bit about Johnny's relationship with Saturday Night Live. In a way, he was responsible for the creation of the show, in that he allowed NBC to create an original show for Saturday night 11:30 instead of running reruns of the Johnny Carson show as they had been doing for many years.
That's right.
And yet, Johnny quickly soured on Saturday Night Live once it aired.
What happened is 29-year-old Lorne Michaels and Dick Ebersol go to Johnny Carson's office to pitch him Saturday Night Live. Johnny did not want the Tonight Show reruns on Saturday night. He thought it was just too much Tonight Show, too overexposed. And he just wanted to make sure that these two young people were going to be doing a show that wasn't similar to the Johnny Show. And they told them their template of what they wanted to do. And Johnny's like, "You have my blessing, go." What he did not foresee was 8 episodes in, Chevy Chase, 8 episodes in, this unknown guy is suddenly on the cover of New York Magazine, and they're flaunting him as the successor to Johnny Carson. And Chevy said something like, "I wouldn't want Johnny's job," and Johnny was insulted. And there was definitely back and forth. Jane Curtin on Weekend Update did a joke about Johnny that wasn't nice. Johnny didn't like, and so. Yeah, they definitely got off on the wrong foot. He wouldn't put anybody of the cast members, the original cast, on his show until they left the show. Chevy Chase actually wrote an apology letter, and that's how he got booked for the first time, I think in 1977, and Johnny met with him the day before, and they became friends. They played poker together, and they spent lots of time together, the wives, and they became friends, but definitely as Saturday Night Live was an issue, and then Dana Carvey started playing Johnny. Johnny just thought the sketches were mean-spirited.
Yeah.
Robert Smigel, who's a brilliant comedy writer, told me it's one of his big regrets upsetting Johnny Carson, and they really were making Johnny have to be out of touch and not really hip, and Johnny did not want to be Bob Hope. He didn't want to be Jack Benny. He thought they stuck around way too long, and those sketches were definitely part of the reason that he left. And Saturday Night Live, even like 2 or 3 episodes before Johnny left, he did a joke about he wanted to kind of like respond to Saturday Night Live, and in his monologue he said, and I hear NBC next season is actually going to be doing a comedy version of Saturday Night Live. That was his kind of revenge a little bit, but it just, Johnny, said, we make fun of people on our show. They can do what they want. He's just like, I don't find them funny, and I don't say those things. So it was definitely a painful moment that that was definitely what that, and NBC moving his show from 11:30 to 11:35 without telling him. Those were 2 big things that definitely influenced him leaving.
I have to admit, Rich Little is arguably best known for his Johnny Carson impression.
That's right.
But I have to admit, I thought Dana Carvey did a better Johnny.
I love Dana Carvey's, Johnny. I thought he captured this really gentle, soft-spoken guy, and I thought it was really great. Rich did a good job, too, and Johnny, whether he was upset with it or not, seemed to like it. Some people theorized that one of the reasons Johnny stopped booking Rich Little is because he, didn't like his impression. But the truth of the matter is Johnny had very little to do with the bookings. He was not good normally with booking guests when he would come up with ideas. Peter LaSalle, Johnny's producer, was the one that convinced Johnny to stop booking Rich Little because basically Peter LaSalle thought Rich Little does the same exact characters every single time. Peter LaSalle, when Rich would guest host the show, would not even come into work based on artistic merit, artistic principle. And that was the real reason that Rich Little was not welcomed on the show anymore. I told Peter, though, I said, the audiences loved Rich. It might have been a lot of the same characters, but the audiences loved him, and he's just said, I got so tired of him, we stopped booking him, and that was it.
Before I forget, because we talked about Doc Severinsen a couple of times in passing, and I didn't think of this until I read about this in Love Johnny Carson, Mark.
Yeah.
I think one reason why Johnny and Doc just hit it off so well and just played off of each other is because Doc and his band, they were jazz musicians. And there's something about jazz gives itself to riffs. It gives itself to improvisation. And Johnny being such a master at improv and ad-libbing, the two of them, whether they realized it or not, they were sort of simpatico as artists.
That's a really interesting point. Yeah, it is one of those things. Johnny was a drummer, and they both loved the same music. And they really got to know each other well when Johnny would play arenas and theaters across the country. And Doc, at this point, I think Milton DeLugg might have been the director, and Doc left the band, and Johnny just would retain Doc to open up for him, and they would go on the road, and that's how they really got to know each other. And Doc Severinsen told me this one story where Doc was always trying to get a joke, and he was in between songs, and Johnny poked his head in and said, do you want to get a laugh next time? And he said, Doc, go get a piece of paper. And he wrote everything down, told Doc where to pause, how to look, and he tried it the next time, and Doc told me he got the biggest laugh of his life from listening to Johnny. And then he looked over and saw Johnny in the wings with this huge grin on his face. I mean, Carson was a master, and him and Doc really were truly friends. In retirement, they went to Mexico together with the wives on Johnny's yacht. And I think Doc, to this day, I know every single day thinks about Johnny to this day.
You talked to more than 400 Tonight Show personnel while you did the Carson podcast. You talked to probably 100, probably 200 others when you put together Love Johnny Carson. Mark, of all the people that you've talked to about the Tonight Show or about Johnny Carson in general, who did you learn the most from? Or is there something you learned from a guest about Johnny or the show that surprised you more than anything else?
I think probably maybe the personal assistants or friends. I know you talked to to Howard Smith, and just to hear somebody that was not in show business talk about their love for their friend John, just the assistance and just how generous and what a good friend he was. I thought Diane Cannon was really great. She was telling me that, you know, it would be Dudley Moore would be on her piano, and that Johnny would bring his drum kit, and they'd be playing together, and Johnny would be making popcorn for everyone. It was just this other Johnny I just didn't. It was exact opposite of what the media made him out to be, cold and aloof. So I think it was guests like that that just really showed me who this guy truly was and what a good guy overall. And yes, he had some bad habits with drinking, being over-competitive and not great as a family man. That's absolutely true, but there's a lot to celebrate, a lot of his life to celebrate, and certainly the work.
We're running short on time for now. I have a feeling later in the year, later in 2026, we'll have you back on. We'll have another conversation about...
I'd love that. I'd be so honored. Thank you.
But in the meantime, the book is out. The book is doing very well. What are you working on next that you're at liberty to tell our listeners?
I am working on some new Carson Podcast episodes. We have one up right now because one of the reasons I stopped after 8 years is that I ran out of guests, and the last 4 years I've unearthed a bunch of other people that did Carson's show and interesting stories. So, yeah, I'm doing that, and then I have a podcast called Inside Late Night for latenighter.com, and I talk to people that worked and wrote and produced and went on late-night shows, everything from Saturday Night Live to Letterman. And we just talk about the late-night days. It's been a lot of fun.
Love Johnny Carson, one obsessive fan's journey to find the genius behind the legend, available wherever books are sold through Dutton Books. You can also find it Amazon.com. It's available in hardcover. It's available as an ebook. It's available as an audio book.
Yeah.
You can follow Mark Malkoff pretty much anywhere on social media. Mark, thank you so much for joining us. Continue success with the book.
Well, Ed, thank you so much. This was fun. I'm grateful.
Cam Clark will join us when we come back on TV Confidential.
If you've got an ED problem, now you can get generic or herbal blue pills for as little as $2 a pill from Steelman Pills.
800-932-2613, 800-932-2613.